This is the Best of the Week on Relevant Radio.
Now, when a married couple discovers that they cannot have a baby, it comes as a shock and as a big cross that they have to go through. This is something that my wife and I experienced firsthand in the early years of our marriage, but we were so blessed to eventually receive the gift of adoption. What are some of the struggles that couples experience when going through infertility? Why is IVF, in vitro fertilization, morally wrong? How should Catholics respond to infertility? Can couples find true peace in their infertility journey? Joining us live from Philadelphia is Dr. Joseph Meaney, the president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center, along with his wife, Dr. Marie Meaney, who has a PhD in philosophy and in modern languages. She's also the author of When Expecting Doesn't Happen, Turning Infertility into a Journey of Hope. Good morning, Dr. Joseph and Dr. Marie. Thanks so much for joining us. It is a joy to be with you here this morning to talk about this important issue for so many couples.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Infertility, of course, is a topic that is dear to both of you. Can you please share your own experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly did come as a shock when we were just expecting to have children. And when it didn't happen, then all of a sudden there was this big question in our lives, what should we do? Who's responsible? All these different questions were very existential for us.
And Dr. Marie, obviously, this is an issue that is dear to you as well. You actually just wrote a book, When Expecting Doesn't Happen, Turning Infertility into a Journey of Hope. Can you share with us a little bit of your inspiration to write the book based on your own experiences?
Absolutely. So at the time, we got married in 2000, we were trying to struggle with this incredible heartbreak, how to deal with it. We were accepting the church's teaching and all of that, but just how to deal with it every day. I found that very, very hard, and I didn't find a whole lot of resources. So it took us 9 years before we had our daughter. And during that time, I already wrote the first version of this book, and simply trying to help couples of how to go forward on this journey in a fruitful way and not just let this be a human tragedy. And also to help friends and families how to help the couple, because often they end up saying the wrong thing and making matters worse without intending to. And then, of course, trying to explain the church's teaching and why it's so much sense, and it's really a way of helping us forward rather than making life more difficult for us.
Was your hope to bring hope to couples that are going through such a difficult heartbreak as you describe it?
Absolutely, yes. To show them that even though while you're in it, it can feel like there's this no end of this tunnel, you will get through that, hopefully with a baby in your arms at the end. But even if not, you will get to a different place, and it will feel quite different. And can be a source of renewal for yourself and your marriage and others. So you can really turn this around. But it's still a very, very hard journey. There's no way around that.
Now, at the time when you started writing the book, there wasn't a lot of information out there, a lot of resources. Along with your book, has that changed?
It has. So first of all, there's a wonderful group called Springs of the Desert that organizes retreats and helps people online. And there have just sort of come up more groups in parishes. There's a greater awareness, I find, all around, also among priests, of how difficult that is and more of a sense of how to deal with it. There's always been also at the time, there are things like Rachel's Tears, and there's the Paul VI Institute in Omaha, Nebraska, that offers some wonderful resources and also medical help in ways that are conform to the dignity of the human person and therefore accepted by the Catholic Church.
Dr. Joseph, can you talk a little bit about the spiritual aspect of going through infertility? Obviously, for us as Catholics, that is definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so important to realize is that infertility is a medical problem. And some people, in some sense, will take it as like a punishment from God, that they did something that is causing this infertility, et cetera. And that is just not not something that the church would agree with, right? That there's nothing like a spiritual punishment. God would not be doing that. And so instead, one has to look at, spiritual renewal and to strengthen our hope and our faith that we can come through this crisis, and that, we can actually come out with a strengthened faith, because we realize that God loves us no matter what, no matter what tragedies befall us, and He's always there to console us and to help us. And I would say Our Lady as well, right? So the Catholic spirituality is the key, really, to coming to peace. Even if that journey of infertility doesn't lead to children, it certainly can lead us to still understanding that God loves us and cherishes us and is not punishing us through infertility, which is really a medical problem.
Can you talk about how a Catholic couple should respond to this cross of infertility?
Sure. I think on the one hand, you have to realize that it can be a great strain on the marriage, because men and women react very differently to this kind of crisis. And chances are that it's harder for one than the other. And so it's really a school of love, isn't it, to try to accept each other in our different responses and realize that the other is often doing his best. So for the woman, it's important to realize her husband feels very helpless. It's very frustrating for him most of the time, because he would like to fix this issue. And there's often no easy fix. Sure, you should go to doctors and specialists, et cetera. But if infertility lasts, then it's just something you have to learn to bear in the meantime. And so he may not be talking about it as much at all as the woman, and it may feel like he's not feeling it, but that's not true. And the woman needs to respect that, but also tell him her needs, that, it is helpful for her if he listens. To him, it may seem, what's the point? He may ask himself, what's the point of it? She's talking so much about it and she's crying, et cetera. Well, that's her way of processing it, her way of mourning and of actually getting through it. And I think the wife should also be open in telling her husband that it's very helpful for him to come along with her to the doctor's appointments. Often one sits alone and the gynecologist's office, and all the other women are pregnant, and one isn't, and one is, dreading to hear another piece of bad news. So, to face this together makes a huge difference. And I think to realize also, God is not expecting you to accept this cross for the next 2 decades. He's expecting you to accept it now, just for the second. And I found that so much more feasible to know that just for this minute, I need to accept it. I can't accept it for this evening, not for tomorrow, not for a month from now, but just for now. And who knows, perhaps in a month from now, I'm expecting, or I'm in a different place and I'm going to experience this differently. So I found this extremely helpful.
And this is really where our Catholic faith really comes in, having that trust in the Lord and understanding divine providence, that He has a plan for us. Dr. Joseph, Holy Mother Church has so much wisdom on just about every topic under the sun. What does the Catholic Church teach about in vitro fertilization and artificial procreation?
Yeah, so essentially, the Catholic perspective is that anything that assists the marital act can be ethically acceptable, but anything that replaces the marital act, so that artificially just takes out, the loving embrace of the couple and produces children in some other way, is not acceptable. And in vitro fertilization essentially creates babies in laboratories. You have a third party who's conceiving the child, the egg and the sperm are brought together in a lab, and that is just so contrary to the dignity of the human person, and so many abuses follow from that. The mortality rate of those embryos that are created in vitro is extraordinarily high, and it's just not in conformity at all with the dignity of the human person. So unfortunately, IVF is what is offered to so many people who are suffering from infertility, but it is a terrible, terrible thing to do.
The Church wants us to go forward in love. And since the fall, we have such a hard time speaking that language right again. And so we tend to choose things that are not in conformity with that love and that wound us and others, because, whatever there's a promise of high success rate and everybody else is doing it, and there's a lot of pressure on us. And that's the problem with IVF. And the damage on the woman, the man, the couple, and the children is tremendous. And you find that among people witnessing to that. Now, whether they're Catholic or not, the key moment, the conception, happens in a lab where the parents aren't present, with technicians deciding which babies are going to be kept, which ones are going to be tossed, which ones are going to be frozen. And, again, do we want that for our children, that they're not protected by us, that there are principles in terms of the survival of the fittest that reign? And it's not surprising that therefore children who've been conceived through IVF then sort of have survivor's guilt. And you have adults, witnesses who've been conceived through IVF who speak about the great pain they have, the thought that they didn't happen, they didn't come into being in the loving embrace of their parents, but in a cold, aseptic environment. And I remember a very striking quote by a woman saying, my mother was not able to accept the pain of infertility, and therefore she put that burden on me. And now I have to carry the suffering. And in a way, it's a lot worse, I'd say, than what the mother experienced. So the one is a human tragedy, and that's terrible, it's sad, it's heartbreaking. I've gone through that. But the other is a wound that we inflict on somebody. It's the consequence of sin. It's making use of another, turning him into an object in order to satisfy my needs. Very understandably, I can completely understand it. But unfortunately, the consequences can be really dire. And what I've done, whatever I'm ultimately seeing in my child as, acting up or consequences of that wound, however visible or not it is, it has happened. And I may be otherwise a wonderful mother and a wonderful father, and I'm not doubting that at all. But the act of conception itself was done in a way that is wrong and that has left potentially great wounds in the child. And the consequences on the marriage are not to be neglected either. I mean, marriages break up over this because it's such a tremendous strain. So don't underestimate it. If the church speaks to that, it's because there's something really wrong about it. And if you go through it, you may well get to taste the bitter fruits of that.
Well, Dr. Joseph, can you talk a little bit about what is actually allowed from a Catholic perspective?
Pope Paul VI Institute in Omaha, Nebraska, that was founded by Dr. Hilgers, who developed a NAPRO technology and the Creighton method. And his method is much more successful than IVF, which many people don't know. So, if you go for something that's effective, go there. So he's recognized that often there's endometriosis that has an important part to play, even if women don't have much of it. And he's developed surgical methods that doesn't leave any scars and that often heals the woman. And he also has methods to help the men and heal them. And many couples first have to learn the Creighton method, which is a kind of family planning method, which is very, very sophisticated. And that often resolves the issue before they have to do any kind of surgery. So I'd say try that. There are practitioners all over the country, so you don't have to go to Omaha, Nebraska yourself.
Well, there is hope out there for anyone who is listening, and I really, really appreciate the two of you joining us here this morning to give us authentically a Catholic perspective on this issue of infertility. Really appreciate it. A quick final thought.
Well, thank you, John. It's amazing how beautiful the gift of life is. And we know that none of us have the right to a child, but rather every child is a gift of God. And we have to respect that and to take that journey of infertility to a place of hope.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Doctors Joseph and Marie Meaney with us here this morning. Dr. Joseph Meaney, the president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center, and his wife, Dr. Marie Meaney, the author of When Expecting Doesn't Happen.